Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag.
Grounded all on!
The Assassin's Creed series has been going on for a while now, and has changed main characters a few times. Assassin's Creed 4 allows the player to assume the role of William Kenway, a quote-unquote privateer sailing along the Caribbean trying to find fame and fortune. While the story continues to focus on the war between the Assassins and Templars, the greatness of this game is found on the high seas. The player can sail a ship in a large, open-world Caribbean sea. He can fight, pillage, and board almost any other ship, and use the proceeds to upgrade his ship and his pirate fleet. There are few things more awesome than the cloud of black powder smoke created by a full broadside of cannons. While there are a few factors worth mentioning in this game, the most obvious is the violence. Violence in this game must be split into two parts. The most impactful and bloody violence is that which comes in hand-to-hand combat with enemies. The player will occasionally be required to engage in close-quarters combat with up to a dozen enemies at once. While much of this combat will involve sticking enemies with swords and blades, and will definitely cause blood splatter to appear, I found that the over-the-top nature of the animations dulled the impact of the violence. If you have ever watched a kung fu movie, you'll know what I mean. The other half of the violence is the ship-to-ship combat on high seas. The player can use chain shot, round shot, heavy shot, mortars, and explosive barrels to attack enemy ships and forts. For most games I wouldn't even mention this combat, but in Assassin's Creed 4 it is the one thing the player will spend most of the game doing. This combat is by far the most awesome part in the game, so the player will likely end up spending much more time firing cannons at frigates than crossing swords with guards. There were only two notable exceptions to the violence. The player gains access to a rope dart around the middle of the campaign. This weapon is a small dart with a rope attached that the player can use to pull enemies to him. If the player is sitting on a tree branch or certain kinds of ledges, he can hook an enemy and then jump back off the ledge. This will hang the enemy. This technique can be useful for taking down a single enemy, but I only ever used it in order to complete optional objectives or challenges. The other exception is one of the side activities. The player can go harpooning for whales and large sharks. I'm not surprised this activity was included, but it's a surprisingly brutal event. The player throws harpoon after harpoon into the creature as it tries to escape or fight back. If the player is successful, which isn't particularly difficult with any of the creatures, the usually oversized creature will be hoisted up onto the ship, bleeding profusely along the way. If the message in this game is about the brutality of whaling, the message was well communicated. There are some other factors that play a very minor role, but the most prominent is substances. The player can unlock taverns by winning bar fights. These taverns allow the player to gamble in a few minigames, hire new crew members, get information, and drink. The player can drink from a random bottle. After drinking, the player's vision and movement are significantly affected. If the player drinks enough times, he will eventually black out and wake up in a hay bale. Other than an achievement, there is no benefit to drinking. While the Assassin's Creed games have varied and mature content, Assassin's Creed 4's heavy reliance on ship-to-ship combat and relative lack of mature content outside of violence led us to give this game a recommended age of 14 years old. For the full written review, including the extra categories, log on to SideStoryGames.com.